Shalom, Truth Seekers. So this is another update of the Covenant Calendar Club's Sundial project progress, and Truth Seekers around the world are practicing over this summer to get ready for getting some good practice over the fall equinox event, so they will be prepared to really nail the spring equinox next year. But I'm collecting all the pictures to this Facebook group, and also if you check the description below this video, there should be a link for a shared public folder that has like the original photos of the data, so you can really zoom in and analyze any sundial data if you want to look closely. You don't have to join Dropbox or anything. You should just be able to kind of click through to see what you want to see. So this is the latest, and some of these are, we might have seen them before for the summer solstice video, but I didn't really get a chance to talk just generally about the practice of these individuals for the equinox event and this project specifically, so I'm just going to go ahead and walk through all these and give some feedback, some food for thought. Some of it might be obvious, but just in case there's somebody who needed to hear a tip, whether you collected this data or not, I'm just going to try and mention some feedback as food for thought. So I believe this came from Montana, and this was good practice. It looks like the 21st and the 18th. So one thing, and a lot of them are just, picking a location and getting a feel for this, and so that's fine. And so just some food for thought. These lines going from like the nail to the mark, you don't really need those. Just get a good dot for where the tip of that shadow is laying on the board, and it looks like you got some dots. And as long as you get early morning and late evening points, that's most important. If you get really good early morning and late evening points, then the accuracy of that dot becomes less important. So it's like you had 5:45, and I can't quite see what was here, what time that was, 9:55. So it might become important to try and get a little sharper point than this dot. You might want to try and trace the actual outline of the tip of your nail. I can't really tell what that is, but I assume it's a sharp nail tip. You might want to trace around that, or stick a point or a pin in your board. It might help. It'll just be good for you to practice around the fall to see what you get. But sometimes, if you're not able to get a big spread of data, like from early morning to late evening, it can become more important to get more accurate marks when you collect your data. I've seen a couple people who, when they taped their cardboard down or whatever it is, they've had marks land on their tape. So that's just another interesting thing to notice with that. This was collected, I believe, right around the solstice event, June 20th and 21st. Again, this is also from, I believe, Montana, same person who collected this. And they have a few notes, something about the times being off by 5 minutes. And that's okay. It's not so, like, being off 5 minutes isn't a big deal. But that's great. It looks like you had 6:30 point, and then maybe like 9:55. So I can't tell what the total. That would be like what, from 10 to 6, 8.5 hours. So yeah, that's kind of a minimum that I think you would need to be able to see the straight line clearly. And again, it might help to make more sharper points. And you'll just see as you do it this fall. But this is a good first start. Another interesting observation here is it looks like they used maybe red dots for one day and green dots for another day, and that's fine. They've got that called out, noted here. The thing is, and it looks like they connected these lines again, so you don't need quite so many lines. You'll find they kind of clutter up your board after a while, but The points are definitely important, and being able to distinguish and remember which point was from which day is going to be helpful. But one interesting thing is, I think the first time I looked at this data, I was a little surprised at the kink in this curve. And I think that's because they connected between red and green points. And maybe they just wanted to kind of see the general shape of that curve, and that's fine. But if you ever see a kink like that from one day of data, I would caution you to be a little careful, because the curve should be a really smooth curve. Like, it shouldn't have a kink in it. And it only has a kink here, I think, because it was spread over a couple days of data. So you want to be careful. If you see a kink like that, there might be something going on with maybe the board moved, or maybe the intensity of sunlight is fluctuating, and you want to make sure, we'll talk about that a little later, but you want to make sure you have consistent sunlight, like hopefully 100% sunlight. And if you're seeing anything less because of like haze in the sky or something, you should find a way to note that, because that can make things move around a little bit. So this sister was collecting data in New York, and she did a really excellent job. I think, let's see, 5 p.m., 6:30 a.m., she had a really great early morning point. And I've been we'll talk again, like I said, this is kind of an important point that I've noticed this round. People are starting to notice, like in the early morning or late evening, that the shadows can be a little faint and seeing like a double shadow. And so it's important, if you go for these early morning points, that you're making sure they're a good solid point, and you're not looking kind of at the you want to make sure you're looking at the tip of your shadow. And like I said, we'll talk more about that later with brother Danon out in California. He's been experimenting with noticing that lately. But this was excellent for a first couple attempts. Again, looks like 7 a.m., 5 p.m. It's a good spread of data. Oh, I guess this was with maybe a taller screw. And then again. Oh, okay. Yeah, she put together a presentation, and this was just great. I'm going to walk through this real quick, but I saved this, and if you click on the link in the description below this video, it will take you to a folder that has all the pictures of the sundial data by year, by month, and by day. But right in the beginning, the first folder that you click on, along with the years, there is a folder called samples, and in that samples folder I put this little presentation she put together. But so this is great. I guess when I was looking at these pictures, I couldn't quite tell what this was mounted to, but now that I can see what this is, there are a few things I'll mention as food for thought. And like, this is great what she did. Like, and I don't know, like, probably maybe the purpose of starting out like this was, maybe the priority was to, if you look down at this picture down here, was to find a good location. And that's really just need to get out there and do it. And your setup doesn't have to be perfect, but you'll see she's got these shaded marks for where there were tree shadows, and then shadows from her house, and then she got a circle around the spot where the sunlight wasn't being affected by those other shadows. And so that's kind of an important first step. And once you've got a location that you're happy with, then you can look into making your setup more rigid, and kind of make sure some of the other things that can happen are taken into consideration. One thing I would say on that note of picking your location, this is excellent, and I think she has some notes in here. Yeah, note when the sun rises and when it leaves, when it sets, look for the trees like in the morning and the evening. When just as you're getting ready to pick your location, kind of get a feel for where those shadows might be cutting off your ability to collect sundial data. And I would say it's important to do that do it again like a week before the actual equinox event, because these shadows from the trees and the house are going to move around. And unfortunately, they might cover that spot. So, and this is for everyone to be aware of. It's good to get practice over the summer, but you're definitely going to want to pull everything out again. Don't wait till the last day before the equinox event this fall. Double check things like a week before the fall equinox to make sure that's still a good location. Other than that, I can see she's got a board on the ground, and again, maybe that was just because just to see if the general location was okay, and that's fine. Now that she has confirmed a good location, hopefully that will be a good location for the fall equinox event. The next thing to consider is maybe making these boards a little more rigid. The thing is, with the ply board, a couple things can happen. Being on the ground like that, and being in the sun and stuff, and being as thin as it is, it might start to distort and curve a little and warp a little, especially the bigger the board gets. Just because it's so thin, it won't hold its flatness, and that's important to make sure your recording surface is flat. So maybe a thicker board, or maybe screw it down on two ends to some kind of a more rigid mount, like two logs or something. But the other thing to watch out for is when you lay a board on the grass like this, and she's pushing pins into the board. So one thing to watch out for is sometimes it could be a little spongy sitting on top of that grass. So as you push a pin in, you might push the grass down under the board, and your board may slightly go up or down. So again, might not have, this is fine for just getting out there for the first time and getting a feel for how the shadows move and where might be a good location. But a good thing to fine tune would be to, once you get your location, to think about how to make sure the setup is nice and rigid. Okay, she has some other notes here. Test it out, and that's just, excellent. Different location, different size board, different size grommens, or gnomons. And I noticed this at the bottom here. I didn't notice at first. I thought she was just doing an illustration of how the point, you want a good point on your nail, and here's an example of a bad point, and I agree. And I guess she was doing two different heights of grommen. So you definitely want your screw oriented this way so it has a nice sharp point. If you have an object like this, what may happen is you'll actually end up catching the shadow off of different edges of that circle, and it'll actually make a difference. You very likely won't be tracking like a consistent point. You'll be tracking kind of different edges of that circle, and that can play games with where the straight line might be seen, especially with such a short, small setup. Maybe not so much for people who are trying like out in the yard and stuff with taller sundials, but for something like this, you definitely agree. You want to use a sharp point. And it looks like she taped this down, and I think she's got a note on the next slide somewhere that she saw that tape getting in the way. Oh, this is another good point. Yeah, here she was saying that tape got in the way. So you just want to make sure. I don't know if she has any cats or dogs in her neighborhood, but as you put so much effort into to record this data, it just I have cats, and I have had days where I was waiting for that critical point, and the cat came by and scratched its head and totally messed up my nail, and all my data was useless at that point. So if you have a setup that is a little vulnerable like this, you might just want to put like a bowl over it in between marks or something to make sure nothing disturbs your screw. Or if you are able to screw it through the board, that would be better. Sometimes with a thin board, the screw, if you notice this screw, like it doesn't have any threads on that top portion of it. So if you were to screw it all the way through, it might be a little wobbly in a thin board. So just food for thought. A thicker board would hold the screw in probably better, and the wood would be less susceptible to warping. But I mean, I've used a thin board like that before, but I did screw it down on the ends to keep it from warping. So just food for thought. Where is that? Yeah, this was actually a good point, and we'll talk about this again later, but she's pointing out, the taller the gnomon, the marks will spread. I guess maybe did she mention it specifically? Well, I'll point it out later, but I thought she said, yeah, here it is at the top. The sun moves fast, and that's absolutely correct. And it really, in the morning and the evening, is most critical. You want to make sure you have good points, and you want to watch closely because the shadow is going to jump like the marks that you see between like 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. are going to not move that far across your board. But in the first like hour or two of the morning, it's going to jump very far and very quick. And so if you have the time, you should collect several points in the morning. But if you have only time to collect 1 point, that's fine too. Get it as early as possible and make sure it's a clear tip of your shadow. But watch out, because it doesn't take long for that shadow to totally like crawl 6 inches across your board. Like here you can see like hers was moving in just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It jumped like 2 or 3 inches. So it moves a lot in the morning. So if you're getting coffee or something, make sure you watch the timing for those morning and evening points closely, because they can come and go very quick. So this was just an excellent presentation. Lots of tips and resources that she included. So check out that PDF for more in the samples folder of the link in the description below this video. So then we have from Missouri, and I guess they're just practicing, just marking. There's not, I don't know what time of day they were able to get, but it looks like a smooth curve, and I'm looking forward to seeing their next attempt. But I'm really excited to see, it looks like they're trying something in the yard too. And I think anyone who has flat yard and is able to try a taller sundial is going to be pleasantly surprised. It's going to be much easier for them to distinguish the straight line, I think, if they just have a nice rigid pole of some sort. Take advantage of as much yard space as you can. Like, if you have flat land, get it. Take advantage of as much of it as possible, because the bigger you're able to get it to spread out, like if you own a field or you're able to get that mark, I mean, even like 50, 100, 200 feet away from your mark for an early morning mark, like if you have that much yard, like do it. Because I do believe it will be very, very clear for you to see the straight line if you have the flat land to do it. I live in West Virginia, so flat land is pretty much non-existent for me, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they come up with here. Not too many points in the ground, but if and I don't know if that's their property on the other side of those trees, but I would just say that looks great. I'm excited to see what they come up with. Using as much yard space as you can. This came from Dubai, and looks like there's a group and they're having a lot of fun. Not exactly sure what they've got down there, but looks like they got some rocks on some kind of board, so that's keep things from blowing away. And you only need to collect for the equinox event, like one day to the next, to look for that straight line. I don't know how much rain they get there, probably not much, so they won't have to worry. But if it does look overcast, maybe with a setup like this, they should just plan to have like a trash bag or something to like cover that setup to keep it dry, if that were to occur. But this looks good. Their morning point was 7 a.m., evening point was 6 p.m., so that's almost 12 hours of data, so that is excellent. They collect a spread of data like that, they should have no problem seeing the straight line. So looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Hey, and if you guys got flat land, you should try a taller sundial too, like a broomstick or something. Take advantage of the flat ground that you have. If you have it, you might be pleasantly surprised with how easy it is to make the equinox confirmation. So again, I think this was just a summary of our sister in New York, and things are a little blurry in some of these pictures in the Photoshop or whatnot. And so as we get close to the equinox event, or when we look closely at the data to try and determine when the straight line occurred, we do have the original photos of these. If you check the description, link in the description below this video, you can actually see those pictures. And one other thing I wanted to note is when you do take pictures of your data, you should be checking to make sure it can be seen clearly. And I know that these can be seen clearly. It looks like maybe just some pixel quality was lost in the Photoshop of this somewhere along the way, but the originals were clear. The other thing I would, just a thought, you'll see how things go this fall. It might not matter, but when you've got pins like this, and you're taking an overhead shot like this, depending on how early and how late you were able to take points, it might become critical to see that fine tip of the point. And so from an image like this, it might not be possible to see where the tip is, because this big pin is blocking the tip when you look down from the top. So I mean, like I said, you'll just see what happens this fall. Maybe if you're able to get early enough and late enough, you can get away with a bigger point like that. But we'll see. And then Montana, again, we saw this already. Just the summary video picture. Good job. Wow, Virginia. And they look like they're out in the yard too. So I'm excited to see what they come up with. If they have the flat ground, I really hope more people give this kind of thing a try, because I think, and I'm glad to see they're also doing it with a board. So I would say that's important, at least the first time you ever do this, like trying to confirm the equinox event. Do it with a flat board, smaller setup that kind of has, you have more control and confidence in confirming, and do it also with a taller object like this in your yard, if you can, so you can see correlation and confirmation between both of your small and your big setup. And I think if you compare with other truth seekers around the world, there are so many that are going to be trying to collect this year. I think we'll be able to confirm from each other. But this is great. Looking forward to seeing what they come up with. This was one of the Covenant Calendar leaders, British Columbia, Canada, and this is just a great example. I love her data. It's a little blurry, but I think she tries to get like every hour. I think like every hour she'll put a pin in, and so this is just a great example of how you see at the middle of the day the spacing between pins is closer, but the shadow is moving much quicker and covering a lot more ground in the morning. So if you're not careful, it'll run off, get on your board and off your board, or you'll miss that early morning point because it moves so fast. So just keep an eye open for that. And then the last one I'm going to mention this evening is Danon in California. He's been experimenting with a sharper tip on his sundial, and he ended up taping a pencil to his gnomon to get that sharper tip. And the conversation I've been having with him recently is he's been noticing 2 shadows of his tip in the early morning. and it's just like a darker shadow that he sees cast from this tip of the pen, and then it looks like there's like a faint shadow around it, like offset from it, and he was wondering which shadow he should be collecting from. And so that phenomenon is, I believe, referred to as the umbra, and the penumbra is kind of the technical scientific term for seeing double shadow like that. And that can happen in the early morning or late evening, or even during the day at any point, if there are some clouds or haziness in the sky. So you just need to be careful to, when you collect, try and make sure you're getting clear sunlight. Like, even if you got some trees blocking the sunlight a little bit, different things that can change the intensity of the sunlight hitting your gnomon can cause you to see two different shadows, and you do want to be marking the darker one, the umbra, but you need to be careful. Try and get your marks with consistent sunlight. Like, if you're noticing two different tips of your shadow, get a piece of paper or something and try and slide it around on your board to confirm where that actual tip is, and just be careful. Make a note if you had to collect when it was like hazy in the sky or something, because that shadow, I've seen it fluctuate and move around, not just the difference between dark and faint, but the whole thing can kind of grow or shrink and move in a different spot if the intensity of the sunlight changes so much. So, I mean, like, one thing that I do if I collect a data point that I know wasn't 100% sun is, next to the time, when I write the time, I'll put like a percent, like 80%, just as a note to myself to be careful about that point, like, because it wasn't taken with 100% sunlight. It was a little cloudy or hazy, and just a note to myself to double check, because that can potentially skew things, especially for those early morning and late evening points. You know, if you're desperately trying to get one, like really early or late evening, it can be really faint and hard to tell. So you want to make sure you're getting an accurate point. And one way to do that is with a piece of paper sliding on the top of your board there, and make sure you're holding that paper flat and flush to the board. Don't have any wrinkles or ripples or anything in your paper. And that moving a piece of paper like that can help you sometimes differentiate where the shadow is, and then you can just like stick a pin through your paper at the tip of your shadow point. Okay, so that's it for now. I think I'm going to stop before my phone hopefully doesn't cut me off, but let me know if you have any questions or thoughts in the below this video, and yeah, stay tuned. We're getting closer and closer to the next equinox event. So shalom, and may Abba bless you. Should continually seek out His truth and love with a pure heart. How do I stop this recording?